is the fact that they're on your project, vetting it in itself. You know, I mean, a sales rep or you know, a producer's rep, it's their choice because they're paid a percentage of the sales. So, or a proper one is, and the fact that they're on it, if you have someone who's a known entity, is vetting to a buyer, right? Like, oh, you're representing this film, it must be good. And then you need a publicist. And the publicist you just pay. And it was expensive. I think our publicist was $20,000 just to publicize for Sundance. And the way we're thinking of it is like, this is our one chance to sell the movie. So we went with the team. Our lawyer and our producer's rep were combined. It was one person. She was she's kind of a big time attorney in LA, and she's from Berkeley, and she likes little movies, and her heart was in it. And so she's who sold the thing, but it was a very weird process. I mean, I think we were new, and at the time, IndieWire, I don't know if you guys subscribe to IndieWire, it's an online magazine, independent film online magazine, although it's sort of added more studio stuff. But they printed IndieWire at Sundance, and it was the buzz, right? Like right. And one morning we woke up and it said Haiku Tunnel had sold to Sony Classics, and we're like, no, it didn't.
Oh my God!
Nobody talked to us, and we were like, we call IndieWire, like, you got to pull those. You got to pull those. We did not sell. I mean, what that effectively does is tells other buyers you're off the market.
Yes.
So we talked to our publisher, and they're like, it's not a bad thing. People are talking about you. Sony ended up buying it. And so, I don't know. We felt a little manipulated by that. I mean, Sony set the price with that, right? I don't know. You know,
right.
I can't prove anything, but like, why would IndieWire print that if they didn't have a credible source telling them that's the case? So I feel like, you know, who knows how that happened, but we ended up selling to Sony.
Interesting. So after that, so it's a very heady experience to have a film at Sundance, and all the sort of the running around and the press and all of that stuff. So what happened after that? You know, were you suddenly like, oh my gosh, I've got loads of money in the bank now, I know what I'm doing, this producing thing, I've got it down?
I don't know if the loads of money would characterize, I mean, you know, we made a decent amount, but for the investors more than anything.
Right.
After that, I got a Michelle Satter, who runs the Sundance Institute, picked me for a producer's fellowship. They do one producer a year, or back then they did. I don't know what they do now. Which connected me with a bunch of industry luminaries like Ted Hope, who now runs Amazon Studios. And
he just left like last week.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, he just left like last week.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and I think but now he's gone independent, and he's got a first look deal with Amazon or something like that.
He's going back.
Yeah.
He's going to produce again. He didn't leave Amazon. He's producing again.
Yeah.
Oh, he's still the head of Amazon Studios, but
no.
Interesting. So, anyway, I got attached through Debbie actually to a movie called Dopamine, and it was with that movie that my fellowship, went back to Sundance with that movie. I was attached to that movie with the fellowship. So, and then, I ended up doing, I don't know, producing a bunch more movies. So that's it.
Was Dopamine also a Bay Area movie? And it seems that you really specialize in Bay Area movies.
Well, yeah. I mean, proximity is plays a lot into that. But yeah, you know, whether or not we shoot in the Bay Area, most of the films that I've been involved have, you know, originated in the Bay Area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been about 30 movies I've done.
Wow.
Something.
Do you specifically want to always be working with movies in the Bay Area? Have you ever thought, no, I should move to LA?
You know, it's funny because I moved up here to go to film school, counterintuitively left LA to come to film school up here. And for years, like a decade, I was like, I got to move back to LA. And then finally I realized I don't want to move back to LA. I'm down there enough. My family's down there. You know, I'll go
really?
Yeah, I'll go down there for projects, but I prefer living in the Bay Area. And honestly, I think I've been, I've had cooler opportunities being up here than in LA. I think LA is a more impacted place. You know, there's a lot more opportunity in LA, but there's also a lot more people. So it's an impact. I will, however, tell my students that if you want to work in LA, then go there first, right? Because I think if you try and establish a career somewhere and then move, you're just ripping up your roots and you're having to start over again, to some degree. It depends on how far you get. But, you know, I only recently have I started thinking about moving back to LA, but it just doesn't make sense to me. I like it here so much, and I feel like I have a cool thing going here.
Yeah, for sure. You know, just recently, somebody asked me the question, well, you know, is there any point should I just move to LA? And I feel as though that's a very, very specific choice that is not really the kind of filmmaker, the kind of thinking that most of the people that I work with are really involved with. I feel as though going to LA is choosing a different path. It's choosing to be involved in the studio, which is fine. It's just a different path.
Agreed. I agree. It's a studio town for sure, and I feel like sometimes people are making independent film not for the art of it, but as a transition. Sometimes even apologetically, it's like, well, my next thing's going to be a studio film.
Right.
So I do feel, yes, it's a big studio town. So it's a, you know, I feel like this storytelling. I feel like New York and San Francisco are great places to be for storytelling, for development. I mean, that happens in LA too, of course. There's a lot of creative people in LA.
A lot.
A lot. But being outside of the Bay, outside of Los Angeles, again, it's a choice, you know, and it's the choice I made. And I'm glad I made it. For a long time, I was like, I gotta move back. And now I'm like, no, I'm glad I stayed.
So over the span of those 30 movies, one of the things that I think is really interesting about you is I can't really tell if you have a preference for fiction or for documentary. And I always think that most filmmakers sort of choose one or the other. But do you have a preference?
Well, you know, it's funny because I've done one documentary. So, and that went really well. So I am a fan of that process. So I don't know. No, I don't know if I have. I don't know if I have a choice. Although I did really like that, and recently I've been thinking I want to be involved with more documentary.
So, what do you think makes a great producer? Which you clearly are, by the way.
Well, thank you. That's very generous. Well, I mean, obviously, there's a couple goals, right? Like you have to complete the movie. So
yes, number one.
there's that.
Yes.
And two, you know, it's a business, so you want to get it to market and you want to sell it. So every project that I've been a producer on has sold it, not necessarily for what it costs, but every film that I've worked on has had a shot at the market. I have a film now that we just completed, and it was supposed to premiere at SF International, and then at Frameline, and both of those festivals went online. And so we are trying to figure out what to do with it in this climate. Somebody's introducing me to Netflix. It would be, I think that's everyone's thing. Like, oh, I want to sell this to Netflix. And I think because of that, Netflix has up some walls. We're trying to get to this person who's it's a gay film. We're trying to get to the people who would sort of program that stuff. And I think I found the person, and I'm, might be getting to them.
Right.
So we'll see what happens with that. But, as a producer, it's like those are two pretty big goals, right? Completing the film and selling the film.
I love it. It sounds simple, but I feel as though so many filmmakers enter into the process of making a feature without having the goal of selling it.
Yeah. And those are that's, oversimplified, of course, but I also feel like as a producer, there's a, you can check off boxes and get, your crew and your locations and all the things that you need to do. But I feel, and I've felt this lately, the last, decade or so, that I think a better way to look at it is curating this process, right? Like trying to figure out what is the best of each of these elements. And, you as a producer of an independent film, you are tasked with getting better than you deserve. You are tasked
Yes.
with getting better than you can pay for, right?
Yes.
So it's figuring out how to charm people out of things or manipulate people out of things. No, I don't think that's, but you're tasked with trying to pull this thing off. And, there's no film that anyone's worked on that's like, oh my God, we have so much extra money and so much extra time.
Right.
You got to figure out how to make it work. And so I think there's a very smart approach to that, which, I think in your first film, you might find that you're just in a survival mode. We just have to get through this. And it's tough. Like making a movie is hard. But, as much as you can control the process and as much as you can curate it, be very specific about your choices and thoughtful about your choices, I think the better you will be in the end. And again, that's a very general thing to say, but
and then what makes you select a project? So I think between the director and the writer, what do you look for?
Well, I say it's three things. One, the material. And the material might be good, but it might not be for me. There are a couple of projects that I started working on before this pandemic. And now I'm just kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with the market, with independent film, I feel like the theatrical part of independent film is going to be compromised. Film festivals are closing. Major theaters are probably going to close because of this. So, obviously everything's moving online, and Netflix and Hulu and those streaming services are king or queen. So it's trying to figure out that market now. And, we're also going into a recession. So like navigating that, costs of films are going to go down, right?
Yep.
The last recession, people were saying that 500,000 is the new million, right? And I think we're going to enter into a point where stuff is going to have to be done for cheaper. I think that documentaries might be an easier thing. There's a huge market for documentaries. They're cheaper. I think there might be it's smaller crews. I think that there might be a bigger opportunity for documentaries now. But I have picked a couple projects because of the content. That's the one thing. The second thing is, is it marketable, right? Like, I might love the film, I might love the script, but not see a way for it to get to market. I think the filmmaker and the project has to be marketable, because part of the story of making a film is the filmmaker, the person behind making it, right? This is, until you have a movie, that's all you have, your story, right? You have your story of what this is. And is it marketable? So has that person won awards? Has that person had short films and film festivals? Has that person? So I think that there's a way, like, how do you talk about your people? How do you talk about your project? All of that is important, because until you have a project, you just have how you're marketing it. So how you're marketing is very important. For Haiku Tunnel, for example, we had Josh Kornbluth, who is, I'm not sure if any one of you have heard of Josh Kornbluth, but he has, in his circles, he has a following, and he's very talented and he's very respected. And so when we were making this film, I would talk about Josh Kornbluth as if everyone had heard of him. And if they hadn't, I would kind of like, oh, you haven't? So it was just kind of a take, and you try and kind of build this, you build this thing that gets bigger. At one point we asked Michelle Satter, do you think Robert Redford would be willing to play the senior lawyer in the movie? She's like, I'll ask. And at that point, we're talking to Robert Redford. So, you're creating this thing, and Robert Redford never did the thing, but we got bigger and bigger. And so you have, this entity that feels like, okay, you're going to get the film made, and it's going to, there's a story behind it that will help you sell it. And the third thing is does it feel inevitable, right? Like, I don't ever want to be on a movie. I don't ever want to be a producer on a movie that relies solely on me to get it done, get it finished and to market, because it's not enough. You need a sense of inevitability from the filmmaker, that this thing's going to get done. Like, that filmmaker has to have the mindset, I'm getting this movie done with or without anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I worked on this. There was a project, and I loved the script. It was so ridiculous. It was a comedy, and I loved it so much, but I just didn't feel like the filmmaker was going to get there. It's like, okay, here it is. Like, tell me what to do. I'm like, no, you got to fight. You got to fight for this. And I don't think any director on a first film, whether they're credited or not, is not a producer. Like, every director needs to, you need to, because there's no space, there's no space waiting for you, right? Like, you have to carve that out. And so a lot of it is how you, how you fight to get this thing done. I will tell you, Debbie and I worked on this movie called Sorry to Bother You. And that director, Boots Riley, fought and fought and fought and fought and did not give up. He did not give up. Not only did he fight to get the movie done, but he fought for his vision. And I don't know if you saw that movie, but that's a wackadoo movie.
Right.
He fought for that vision. And it's because he fought for that vision, and because he stuck to the script and stuck to the story that he was making, that it became special, right? Like, that's why people loved it. And all of the things that were difficult, all of the things that, I was the first AD on that, and I got a producer credit because there were some problems, and I actually got Debbie to come in halfway through and, be a hero and help get that thing finished, because we were going into the toilet because of the there were two producers on that didn't know what they were doing. It was very easy for them to be cutting the things that made the movie special, and Boots fought for it, and those things are what's written about as being special about that movie. So,
and you know, it seems to me watching you that your experience producing Dolores has been, I don't know, it looks like it's a real high point for you. I know for me, that to me is one of the all-time best documentaries I've ever seen.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I feel like I was super lucky to be part of that. Also, that was...
Well, you've worked with Peter Bratt before.
I did. I worked as the first AD. Debbie actually introduced me to the Bratts. I worked on a movie that Debbie was a producer on called La Mission, which is a terrible title because everyone thinks it's LA Mission. But it's the Mission.
Which I love that movie as well.
Me
I'm
too.
a huge Peter Bratt fan, huge.
Me
Follow
too.
Me Home, I showed at my cinema for a week, and we had one of the producers come out, and I would go and sit in the cinema every night and listen to her talk. She talked at every screening, and I learned so much about that movie.
Nice. Yeah, I never saw it. He doesn't have it on video. He only has it on
Nobody
too bad,
can see it, I don't think.
Yeah. No, I love those guys. But I was really fortunate to be on that project. It was not a hard film. Well, first of all, it came with money. I mean, it was a big budget. It was $1.6 million for a documentary. That's a lot of money, and probably an irresponsible amount. You know, I mean, the whole idea was that we were going to make the definitive Dolores Huerta movie. And, you know, we wanted this thing to be part of Chicano studies, and that Carlos Santana, who's the executive producer, it was his idea and his money, and he put $1 million in, and then we raised another $600,000 fairly easily. People were very willing to put in the money for that film because people wanted to tell her story. For those of you who don't know who she is, Dolores Huerta is she was the co-architect of the United Farm Workers Union with Cesar Chavez. And she's still alive. She just turned 90. She's still working.
She's still fantastic.
And I just did a huge online fundraiser for her a week ago, which was less than that, 5 days ago, Saturday. It was very difficult. It was a lot.
I so wanted to be there. I was moving, and I just...
it's online if you want to see it.
Okay.
It raised a ton of money. It had an enormous amount of celebrities and politicians take part in this thing. And it raised a ton of money for her foundation. Her foundation is serving a lot of the communities, underserved communities of people who are undocumented.
Can you say the name so some brilliant person can put the link in the chat?
The name, it's called Si Se Puede at 90. She just turned 90 years old. If you type in Dolores Huerta 90th birthday, you will find it. It's on YouTube. It's also, if you go to doloreshuerta.org, you can find the...
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, it's there. Thank you.
So, but that film was it did do well. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival.
And it won a Peabody.
Yeah, here, look. It won a Peabody Award.
Fantastic. I mean, I think that not only does it do the job probably that the Carlos Santana wanted, which I would say is that it provides an entire document of Chicano history that's so important. But as a film, it's just so beautifully made, so incredibly well done. The editing, the use of archival footage, and it truly is an activist piece. I mean, when I saw it as a premiere, I was like, but I want to run out and change the world. That's what that movie does.
Well, I think that we were, in a sense, we premiered on Inauguration Day, the day Trump was inaugurated. We premiered at Sundance on that day. And I think, as if you can recall those times, many people were very upset on that day. And people considered our screening like church. You know, people were, and it became, you know, rather than a historical document about this woman's life, it became a call to action. And people felt energized and wanting to go out and fight. Her example is a strong one, I think, in terms of fighting for social justice. So,
and I think that, you know, before we open it to questions, I want to say that this to me feels like a real segue, because, you know, you talked about the material being the most important thing. And I feel as though I want to ask you a bit about your work as a director. And I feel as though your work as a director is even more clearly an activist kind of approach. And I just wanted to have you talk a bit about your work as a director, because I'd like everybody to find out about that. And it seems very appropriate for the time that we're in.
Yeah, I think so. So I have a drag character, and I've made my 10th film with that character. And the 10th film is about racism and about inclusion and about rejection of a person of color from a neighborhood. It's a comedy and a fable and a musical, and the person of color is the color blue. So it's like an adult fable, but it feels like it's resonated and continues to resonate in film festivals. I think I'm in like maybe 45 festivals so far. I expect it to probably get closer to 100. Wow. Especially now. It's just a weird time because festivals are all online.
Right.
So I'm having to ask if there's geo-blocking, and if it's a paid admission. Some people want to just put it online for you know, open to everyone for free for a month, and I'm like, I can't do that. It just makes it, other festivals won't want to play it, you know, online. So I'm asking for geo-blocking. I'm asking for a limited number of admissions. So,
and what do you think then? Because I know you've been developing the Cousin Wonderlet character for a long time, and you didn't mention well, maybe you did. Anyway, it's a musical. There's singing, there's dancing. I mean, even from a producer, first AD kind of perspective, it seemed to me that that was a lot of work that went into that film. How long is it? 20 minutes?
Yeah.
20. Mm-hmm.
19 minutes and 31 seconds. Which festivals are around to 20 minutes. Yeah, no, it was a lot of work. Because I do a lot of work in the Bay Area, I do a lot of commercial work as well. A lot of people came out for me. You know, we got free cameras and free gear. It still cost a ton of money because it was big. We had to close down a street. There were a lot of people. There was a lot of makeup. Dolores Huerta was in it, actually, which we actually screened on her fundraiser.
Did you?
Well, I asked her and she didn't want to do it. I'm like, do you not want to do it because it tarnishes your image? Because she's in drag. She has a big beard. Or because you don't like your performance? She's like, because I don't like my performance. I'm like, Dolores, it's very good. So what we ended up doing is we had Rosario Dawson was on the show, and I asked Rosario if she would be willing to take a look at Dolores's scene from this movie and give her some feedback. And Rosario played Dolores Huerta in the Cesar Chavez movie from the Diego Luna movie from a few years ago, but she loved it. Anyway, it was, you know, it was one of the best film experiences I've had. We had a great crew. People were really happy to be there and making this thing. And I was working with some great musicians. I don't have a lot of musical talent. If you watch the movie, you'll see that. But I was working with some great musicians two composers actually, who helped, you know.
And are you working towards making that story into a feature?
Not that story.
No. Okay. But the character.
Story. Yeah, and probably with the same team.
Okay. But it's the cousin Wonderlet character, and she'll be going in. Again, I haven't had time to be posting anything, but my current hashtag is put joy in the system. And to me, cousin Wonderlet is the epitome of that. She puts joy in the system wherever she goes, right?
Yeah.
So let's open it to questions. As always, I'm going to ask you not to write in the chat. It's too much, but just raise your hand or do the electronic raise your hand and see if anyone has any questions for Brian. No, they're all just completely stumped. Ralph.
You mentioned you wanted to talk to Netflix, but it's like really hard to get in. I'm amazed in a way with your track record that it's even someone your level can't even just talk to someone at Netflix. Do you want to shed some light on that?
I mean, Netflix has some walls up because I think everyone wants to go to Netflix, right? And but we're looking for the specific person who programs gay content. Because we want to go in with an ally. So that's the person, there's a person who's programmed. This is a film that is a ridiculous comedy, but it has screened very well at our test screenings, and we feel like there's a market for it. And I don't know if festivals as a marketplace is viable right now. And there are two different theories of thought about premiering your movie online, whether that damages future sales or not. So we've decided to pull it from, Frameline wanted to show it online, and we've decided to pull it from that so that we could retain the commercial value of it. Anyway, so we're close to getting to that person.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree, Rolf. It's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Virginia and Debbie, you've worked with Brian for many, many, many years now. And I just wonder if either of you have a question or a comment.
I know where all the bodies are buried, so I don't have any questions.
We're going to have that conversation another day.
Yeah, please don't let Debbie speak. Please mute her.
Don't mute her.
I'm actually one of the bodies that is buried.
Oh.
I've known Debbie.
Well, I'll just say that anytime both Debbie and Brian, I have to also credit Debbie with helping me get my foot in the door. Not that I didn't take a class with Debbie, but she is well, wait a minute, I lie. I did take a class with Debbie, and that's how I got to know her, and that she helped me get into film work as a PA when I was starting out. But I have to say that these are two of my favorite people to work with, and that one of the reasons is because not only are they good at what they do in terms of their skills as producers, but also because they're two really good people, and they care about people, and they always take care of the people around them. So that to me is a huge thing, having worked in film for 20-something years at least. When you work with people who are in charge, know what they're doing, know what works and what doesn't work, and the people who've hired them listen to them, that is a huge it makes a huge difference for anyone who's on the crew working on a project. But it also makes a big difference when those people have the kind of positive energy that both Debbie and Brian have, that make working fun and also builds community among the people that are working together these long, exhausting hours. So.
Yes, thank you, Brian. I wonder what are the kind of things sometimes that you have to deal with to kind of make sure that you create that safe and welcoming and inclusive environment on set. What are some of the things you have to do?
Well, one of the things is I try not to hire ass clowns. I think you get a sense, it's like, it's funny because years ago, I broke up with my boyfriend and then moved in with a DP who was a friend of mine, and he ended up moving to LA. But he was a great DP, but he was a real asshole to work with, and I just couldn't hire him anymore. It just wasn't worth it. And so I think that's one thing. I also feel like it's really important I don't really like to look around the set and see only white men. So it's really important to me to be, as you said, inclusive. As I mentioned, I teach at San Francisco State. So I pull a lot of people of color and women onto the set. But I've also recently started this thing at least for short format stuff, where it's one thing for me as a producer to be able to hire production assistants, right? But where do I go if I want to find a Black DP? Where do I go if I want to? So I've been thinking lately about how to fix that. And these things are in place with unions in LA, but I've talked to a couple production companies, and I want to start this apprenticeship program where they get paid as a PA, but they're in a department, like they're either shadowing a director or they're with in the electric department or whatever. And a couple of production companies have agreed. Now I started working on this, and then I would pull folks from my school. I met with the Black Film Club at San Francisco State. I met with the Feminist Film Club at San Francisco State. And I'm trying to make that connection in a more formal way.
It's so interesting that one of the things that I see is that when we want to really be very actively working on inclusion, it's not just like saying, oh, I want to include everybody. You have to take those steps. And I've been teaching this stuff for years, but you can't just say, oh, I want to be inclusive. You have to be willing to take the steps to, as you just gave the examples, go to the Black Film Club, go to the Feminist Film Club. Recently we were looking for a female DP for a film, and went to a place that deals with DPs and said, we want a female DP. And they were like, why? You want the best DP? And we're like, yeah. And it's going to be a woman.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I don't, to find a female, I was looking for a female DP for a project up here, and it's difficult. I mean, I know a couple in LA, but it's tough. So I just feel like, well, we need to work on that process. We need to seed that.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm glad that you're doing it. Makes all the sense in the world to me, but I'm glad that the production companies are open to that. Does anybody have a question? Oh, Daniel Turner.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead.
Hey,
Hi.
hi. I'm Daniel Turner. I'm actually producing a short with Jordan Streeter that you're
Oh
helping.
yeah, Jordan just texted me yesterday.
That's really cool. I was just kind of wondering if you had any insight on productions that were scheduled to film down in LA, and if when things boot back up, if we're going to see some of those come up here because things are double booked down in LA.
Well, I don't think things are going to come up here because there's not room in LA. I mean, I think there's going to be more crew than productions, because films are thinning out. I'm actually shooting something for Fox in 2 weeks, and there are very, very strict rules about how many people can be on set and all of that stuff. So, I don't know if things are going to push up here because of that. I think things that were scheduled to come up here will come up here for, location reasons. This thing is, there's reasons to come up to San Francisco for this. I think the bigger concern is how we're going to deal with this coronavirus in production, and people are figuring it out. I just for at least for short format stuff, I just went through a production company, and we're sort of figuring out the capabilities, like how to do this, how to do stuff remotely. And in fact, I literally have a call right now that I have to sort of go to. My understanding was this was going to end at 10.
Yep, it's going to end at 10. You can
I
go in.
But yeah, no, I know that, and I would have stayed longer to chat.
No.
But I literally have a call at 10 to talk with a big tech company about how to do remote shooting. Oh,
That's them.
no, it got pushed to 10:15, so I have 15 more minutes if you want. But it's literally to talk about how to do remote shooting in 2 other states. And there are a lot of people who are innovating in this city for sure, who can figure out how to do stuff remotely. So there's I've talked to a couple DITs who can set up a video village remotely, so people can be wherever to do, and I'm sure Debbie has talked to the same people, to do productions remotely, where you have very few people on set. I've talked to a DP who can do it himself, right? Like, he can put up a mic. People are innovating to try and figure this out. So there's a whole new, there are all of these new ways that people are doing things.
Yeah, I'm seeing.
Daniel, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think we were supposed to talk. I think
Sure.
Jordan was. I think we did. Did we exchange messages?
I think we have an email that I should be getting on with you.
Anyway, yeah.
I'm seeing a lot. I call it coronavirus creativity. In fact, this whole series of conversations I'm doing is based on something that came up because of coronavirus, because I know it's hard to get people like you and Debbie and Virginia when you're always on set, usually. So you're pinned down now. I can get you. Anyway, I definitely, we want to keep this to an hour, and I just want to thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being willing to extend. And if anybody has a question, please go for it now, because I'm going to let Brian go. Steve, and then Joshua. Thank goodness. Stephen, where are you?
Sorry, I'm not on video, but
okay.
Question is, you were talking about remote shooting. Have you looked at any of the real-time shooting where they're using LED screens in order to do it, or any sort of volumetric shooting at all ever?
I haven't, but I did just produce a commercial that was shot totally on on people's computers. It was a get out the vote project for the Latino community. Actually, it was with Jake Kornbluth, who I did Haiku Tunnel with. And we cast 12 people. You know, I think we got 160 submissions, all online, and we ended up recording people at their computers. And, you know, a big part of the task was figuring out tech. So with, you know, we figured out with a Mac, at least the current Mac, you can record QuickTime locally and be on Zoom. So we were able to direct them on Zoom and record locally. So the camera would serve both. For this thing with Dolores, it was live, but there was a lot of pre-recorded stuff. You know, a bunch of these folks sent in videos, but we also pre-recorded 2 segments. One was with Gloria Steinem, who her team was like, we wanted her live, and her team's like, she's in her 80s. So you're taking a risk with the tech or whatever. She's smart. She would have been fine. But we ended up pre-recording it, and we ended up having, you know, I think with online stuff, there's a lot of, you know, there's forgiveness with technology, but we ended up having a bunch of other people on the call, and we would pin the individuals' videos, so they were full screen, and then recorded them locally. So everyone had, you know, sort of their own single, right? And then we edited the thing from that. We did the same with the cast of Penny Dreadful. There were 5 of them that were on the thing. Some of them were able to record QuickTime locally, and that was the best quality. Others, we did the same thing. We pinned it. So I think, you know, I mean, like, we've lowered our standards with what we expect from, you know, being in quarantine. Anyway, I don't know if that even answers your question, but like people are figuring out ways to make content.
Yes, and it's fascinating. I think it's fascinating to watch what the creativity that's coming out as a result of all this. Josh, Jonathan. Sorry, Jonathan, where did you go? Oh, there you are. It's funny, everybody keeps moving around. Jonathan, go ahead with your question. Jonathan's calling in from Trinidad.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Brian. What struck me, I mean, everything you said struck me, but what you know, you said that you were looking, sometimes you look for black DPs, right? And I don't know if it is you will think about or working with people from outside the United States. I don't know who are DP. I mean, like for myself, I'm a DP for over 15 years here in Trinidad. That has worked on hundreds of commercials. That has won about 7 international awards, from producing to conceptualizing to execution. And I've never, to be honest, I've never worked with a foreign company without my team. But I was just listening to you, and I was just wondering if possibly I could send you my material, and if you could see, you know, if I'm the right fit with some projects, you know, if I understand that importance of finding the right DP, you know, for your projects, especially if people of color. But, you know, so I just wanted to know if it is that maybe I could send you some of my work.
Sure, sure, of course.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend Jonathan. Angie, what were you going to say?
Hello. So I've been talking to Joanne. Everything you've talked about kind of answered a lot of the questions I had, but I'm actually pursuing a degree at San Francisco State in the near future. Hopefully I see you there. I was wondering if you had any insight based on what you've seen with your students, especially with any misconceptions that they have trying to enter film school, or just in general, any insight that you would have for students, the film students, because I'm kind of on the newer side. I've only recently started pursuing a career in film about 2 years ago. So
she's going to be a producer.
Yeah.
Well, you should take my class. I teach a producing class. I'll let you in if you want. There's space.
When
Anyway.
are you starting, Angela? When are you?
I'm applying for 2021.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so, well, you know, I realized when I went to film school, and I went to state as well, that I learned how to make student films, and then I left school and I learned how to make professional films. And of course there's overlap. A lot of the stuff overlaps, right? But I think once I started making stuff professionally, I'm like, oh, this is how it's done, right? And of course it's you know, there's overlap. It's a different pace. There's a different, you know, there's a different level of efficiency. But I would say, I try and do this with my students. I think it's very important to get on the set and see how a professional set is run. So however that is, you know, there's a lot of these bigger companies will not take interns, but I would say if you can get on the set, even if you're working for free, there's value in that, right? Like, I think there's first of all, there's learning, right, that takes place, but also you're making contacts. And I think if you just put yourself on a set and make yourself invaluable, you'll get some opportunities. So, but I do think being on a real set is important. And Debbie does this too, and sometimes I do this with Debbie, or for projects that she's on. I try and feed as many people into students into the industry as I can. At one point, my friend, and actually Debbie's friend, was the production manager of 13 Reasons Why, and they called me and asked for some office people, and I sent them some students, and then next year those students had risen to another level, and they called me, and so I ended up feeding the office of that production for, I think, all 3 seasons. Is it 3 seasons?
Yeah, and as soon as any kind of production can start again, 2 of my clients are going into production on features immediately. So Angela and I talk all the time. So.
Thank you so much.
I also wanted to, as always, you know, I work with filmmakers one-on-one. And if you would like to talk to me about working with me, I'm going to put my calendar in the chat, and you can book. I called it a Filmmaker Success Breakthrough Session. I actually had 2 yesterday, and I was talking to filmmakers, and it's actually become my favorite thing to do when I meet somebody for the first time, and I find out what their vision is for themselves and their career and where they want to go as a filmmaker, because I feel as though once I can sort of get an idea of where it is they want to end up, then we know better what next steps to take. And that's why I love to hear about your early experiences, you know, and how things went when you didn't know what you were doing, you know. And there were so many great things that you said about, for example, one of the things that I think is, I feel as though sometimes my middle name is Wet Blanket, because I'm always giving out hard information that people don't want to hear. And, you know, I think that for a first-time director, the fact is that they have to be a producer. There's just no other way around it. And it's just something people don't want to do. And I remember when I went to the American film market this year for the first time, and I met literally hundreds of filmmakers who were there, who were like, oh, I have a script, or I have an idea, and I want to find somebody who's going to produce it. And I'm like, it's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to find a producer who is as inexperienced as you know, much easier than you're going to find an experienced producer.
Yes.
But have a great project, then you can attract
yes
people.
Have a great project. Yes, absolutely.
And be able to talk about yourself, be able to figure out how what is special about you. Why are you top 10%? Why does your film get made over all of these other films that you want to, that want to happen? You have to figure out, how do you articulate that? How do you separate yourself? What is special about you? And then also create that, win awards, submit to film festivals, get little movies in if you're making a big movie or whatever. Like, you want to create this kind of entity, this unstoppable entity, both for yourself and for your project. So.
Well, Brian, thank you so much. It's always such a pleasure to hang out with you.
Thanks for inviting me, Joanne.
I'm coming to Starbucks soon, so.
Okay, good. Good. Wear your mask. They won't let you in.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, and goodbye. And have a great call, and we'll all be in touch.
Okay.